He doesn't recognize me at first. The boardroom door swings open, and I count his breaths. 1, 2, 11 people around this polished mahogany table, its surface reflecting fluorescent light like still water. Only one of them owes me everything. My Louboutin heels click against marble flooring as I make my way around the room. Deep emerald blazer over black silk, diamond studs catching the light. My grandmother's heirloom. The only thing I kept from before. Board members rise. Handshakes. Formal greetings. I move with measured steps, savoring each moment, letting them wonder who this woman is and why she holds their future in her hands. I reach Julian. Gray threads at his temples now. Lines around his eyes that weren't there 5 years ago. He extends his hand. Professional smile that doesn't quite reach his pupils. Miss Thorne, welcome to Whitford Strategic Solutions. We're honored to have you leading us into this new chapter. Our palms touch. The leather chairs whisper as board members shift. Someone clears their throat. Understanding blooms across his features like a bruise forming in slow motion. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something colder. Fear. Elise? The syllables break in his mouth, a forgotten name surfacing from wherever he'd buried it. Miss Thorne will do. I hold his hand a moment longer than necessary. Let him feel the cold, smooth surface of my rings. We're colleagues now. Best to maintain professional distance. Board members exchange glances. They sense history they don't understand. 5 years of silence hanging in the air between two people who used to share a bed. I take control. Please, everyone sit. We have a lot to discuss. I came back, not as the woman he left holding cold coffee and an empty lease. Not as someone he could walk past without seeing. I came back with my name on the building. Maybe you know what it's like to be discarded. To be told you weren't part of someone's picture. To spend years wondering if they ever think about you at all. If they remember your laugh, or just the convenience of your presence. He'd driven his father's company into the ground. $180 million reduced to 47 in less than 18 months. Failed expansions. An affair with a board member's wife. Desperate pivots that reeked of a man who'd inherited a throne he never learned to sit in. And now I held everything he'd chosen over me. But revenge wasn't why I'd come back. At least that's what I kept telling myself.
Pull your chair a little closer to the fire, friend. I'm Mr. Harlan. What do we really want from the people who wronged us? Their suffering? Their regret? Or just the chance to be seen, truly seen, by someone who once looked right through us? Tonight, Nadia Thorne shares what happens when the person you dismiss turns out to hold everything you want. She built an empire from the ashes of abandonment. She bought the company of the man who left her with $43 and a broken lease. If you've ever been underestimated and lived to prove them catastrophically wrong, please subscribe and join us by the fire. Now, Nadia, take us back to the morning everything changed.
5 years before that boardroom, I woke up to lukewarm coffee and a man who couldn't meet my eyes. The radiator was clicking at 6:30 in the morning. Some pipe expanding somewhere in the walls. I'd meant to tell the super about it for months. Never did. Strange. The details that stick with you when your life is about to break apart. Julian sat on the edge of the bed. Shoulders stiff. That charcoal Tom Ford blazer I'd helped him pick out already on, like he was dressed for escape. I got the Singapore position. He said it to the wall. Not to me. To the wall. That's amazing. I sat up. Tried to find his eyes. When do we leave? Silence. The kind of silence that has its own weight. Its own temperature. Julian, when do we leave? He finally turned. And I saw it then. The thing he'd been hiding. Written across his face like a confession he couldn't speak. You're not coming. 3 words. The coldest 3 words I'd ever heard. And he said them like a door closing. I don't understand. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. The coffee mug was still warm in my hands. Julian, we talked about Singapore. You said we'd find an apartment near the harbor. You said. I know what I said. He stood. Finally faced me. That charcoal blazer I'd helped him pick out 6 months ago. He was already wearing it. Armored for escape while I sat there in his old t-shirt, trying to understand how the floor had just disappeared beneath me. My father's making me take this seriously. The family, the company, what I represent. He straightened his collar, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. Now it looked like preparation. This position isn't just about me anymore. It's about legacy, about proving I can handle what's coming. And I'm what? A distraction? You're not part of the picture, Elise. He said it like he was reading from a script, like he'd rehearsed this. You never were. Not part of the picture. I'd abandoned my graduate program for him. Moved to New York because he said we were building something. Rearranged my entire life around a man who'd apparently been treating me as a placeholder this whole time. How long have you known? About Singapore. He hesitated. Julian, how long? 3 weeks. 21 days. 21 breakfasts across from a man who knew he was leaving me. 21 nights in a bed with someone who'd already packed his bags in his mind. 21 chances to tell me the truth, and he'd chosen silence instead. Is there someone else? The hesitation lasted one breath too long. Not a denial, not even an excuse. Just silence. And in that silence I had my answer. Elise, I don't. The coffee was cold now. I hadn't noticed. Don't insult me with whatever speech you've prepared. He moved toward the door. Stopped. Turned back with an expression I couldn't read. Maybe guilt. Maybe relief. Maybe nothing at all. You're resilient, he said. You'll land on your feet. Resilient. The word hung in the air like a slap that hadn't quite landed. Like resilience was a compliment instead of an excuse. Like being strong meant I didn't deserve honesty. Didn't deserve a conversation that started before he'd already made his decision. The door closed at 6:47 in the morning. I sat there, cold coffee in my hands. Radiator clicking, morning light cutting through the blinds and slats that looked like bars. And I understood something with perfect clarity. I had been a placeholder in someone else's story, not a person. Something temporary, something he was always planning to replace. The next week existed in a haze of logistics and devastation. The apartment lease was in his name. He'd paid for everything. I'd let him stupidly, gratefully, not realizing I was building my life on borrowed ground. I checked my bank account and found $43 staring back at me. $43 and a number for a graduate program I could no longer afford to finish. Dara found me crying in the lobby of my former building 3 days later. She was supposed to be picking up a package. Instead, she picked up me. Mascara running, 2 suitcases, and what was left of my pride. You're staying with me, she said. Not a question. And we're not talking about him tonight. I hadn't told anyone about the breakup. Hadn't been able to form the words. Dara took one look at my face and understood everything. His father never approved of me. I knew that. Julian had mentioned it once, early on, when he still thought being honest with me was important. Something about family expectations. Something about the kind of woman a Whitford was supposed to marry. I'd told myself it didn't matter. Told myself Julian was different. That he saw me for who I was, not who his family wanted me to be. I was wrong. The man I'd loved for 3 years had looked at me that morning and seen nothing worth keeping. Nothing worth fighting for. Just a placeholder. Something to be moved out before the real life began. That word echoed in my skull for weeks. Resilient. The way he'd said it. Like a consolation prize. Like my ability to survive his betrayal meant he didn't have to feel guilty about it. I thought about calling him. Texting. Demanding the explanation I deserved. But what would that change? He'd made his choice. He'd made it 3 weeks before he told me. Maybe longer. Maybe he'd been deciding to leave me since the day we met. The photo was the hardest part. I found it while unpacking at Dara's place, crammed between books I'd grabbed in the chaos. 2 people on a rocky beach in Maine, his arm around me, my head thrown back mid-laugh. We'd been so happy that day. Or I'd been happy. Maybe he'd just been performing. I should have thrown it away. I didn't. I shoved it in the nightstand drawer instead, underneath takeout menus and old receipts. Told myself I'd deal with it later. Told myself it didn't mean anything. But I kept it. For reasons I couldn't name. For reasons I didn't want to examine. I didn't know it yet, but that word, replace, would become the engine of everything that came next. Dara's apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in Washington Heights. 1 bedroom that we now shared. A kitchen the size of a closet. Water stains on the ceiling shaped like Florida. She never said I told you so. She'd never liked Julian. Had told me once early on that men who pay for everything usually think they own what they've bought. I dismissed it as jealousy, as not understanding what we had. Turns out Dara understood perfectly. She was too kind to remind me of that now. Instead, she left job listings circled on the kitchen table. Picked up groceries without asking me to pay my half. Gave me space to fall apart and time to put myself back together. I got a job waiting tables at a restaurant in the meatpacking district. The kind of place where appetizers cost more than my daily wage and the clientele wore watches worth more than my entire education. Double shifts. 12 hours on my feet. Aching arches and a smile I had to paste on like makeup. My phone screen cracked the second week. Dropped it in the alley behind the kitchen during a break I was too exhausted to take. The fracture ran corner to corner, shaped like a river delta, branching into smaller and smaller tributaries of damage. I couldn't afford to fix it. I couldn't afford to cry either. Crying felt like something that required time and privacy and the luxury of falling apart. I had none of those things. So, I worked. Pasted on the smile. Carried plates of food that cost more than my rent to people who looked through me like I wasn't there. 10 weeks in, I stopped feeling anything at all. Numbness became a kind of armor. I woke up. I worked. I came home. I stared at that water stain on Dara's ceiling until sleep finally came. Repeat. 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 The mathematics of survival are simple. You subtract everything that isn't essential. You divide your energy between work and rest. You multiply nothing because nothing grows in survival mode. You just endure. And then came the night everything changed. It was a Thursday. Late. The restaurant was winding down, but two women lingered at table 14. Power suits. Matching Cartier watches glinting under the dim lighting. The kind of women who owned rooms when they walked into them. I was clearing a nearby table when I heard it. The coordination problem is killing us, one of them said. We've got the technology, we've got the funding, but the logistics between rural clinics and urban hospitals, nobody solved the handoff. I froze. Stack of dirty plates balanced in my hands. If someone could standardize the transfer protocols, the other woman continued, integrate the scheduling systems across different healthcare networks, we're talking about a platform that could scale globally. The same problems exist in Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. Everywhere that infrastructure is fragmented. I knew this problem. I knew it because I'd spent 18 months researching adjacent infrastructure for my unfinished thesis. Healthcare logistics in underserved communities. Coordination failures between institutions. The gap between having resources and getting them where they needed to go. My thesis had focused on supply chain management for medical equipment. But the underlying problem was the same. Fragmented systems. Poor communication, solutions that worked locally but couldn't scale. I stood there, dirty plates growing heavier in my arms, listening to two strangers describe a billion-dollar problem I'd once believed I could solve. The first company that cracks this, the first woman said, will transform global healthcare delivery. We're talking about saving lives on a scale most people can't even imagine. They paid their bill, left a generous tip. Walked out without ever noticing the server who'd stopped breathing while they talked. That night, I lay awake in Dara's apartment, staring at the water stain shaped like Florida, thinking about fragmented systems and coordination failures, and the 18 months of research I'd abandoned when I followed Julian to New York. I'd left that work behind because I thought love was more important than ambition, because I thought building a life with someone was worth more than building something for myself. I'd been wrong. And now I was lying on a borrowed bed, cracked phone on the nightstand, $43 slowly becoming $57 through tips I hoarded like gold, and I realized something. The knowledge was still there. The research, the frameworks, the understanding I developed before I let a man convince me that his dreams mattered more than mine. It was still there, waiting. Something shifted in my chest. Not hope. Hope was too soft for what I was feeling. Too fragile. This was something colder. Harder. Intention. I didn't know what shape it would take yet. Didn't know how a woman with $57 and a cracked phone screen was supposed to transform herself into someone who could solve global healthcare logistics. but I knew something fundamental had changed. Something inside me had stopped dying and started building.
It sounds simple when you say it fast, but real intention, the kind that rebuilds a life from wreckage, that's something else entirely. Nadia stood in that restaurant with dirty plates in her hands, invisible to the women whose conversation would change everything. The world saw a server, but in that moment, she was seeing herself differently, not as a placeholder, as an architect. Most people break at rock bottom, but some people find something down there in the dark, not hope exactly, something harder. They find the foundation everyone else missed, and they start building. If you've ever built something from the wreckage of what someone else destroyed, please subscribe to keep these stories alive. Now, Nadia, take us through those 5 years.
Year 1. I finished my thesis remotely, begged my former advisor to let me complete the program part-time, worked 60 hours a week at the restaurant and spent every other waking moment researching, writing, revising. The thesis I'd abandoned for Julian became the thesis I completed in spite of him. Graduate degree. Finally, 16 months after I'd given up on it. Year 2. I started consulting, small contracts at first. Underserved hospitals in New Jersey and upstate New York. Places that couldn't afford the big firms but desperately needed help with their logistics. I worked for almost nothing, building a portfolio, learning what actually worked in the field versus what looked good in academic papers. I saw something nobody else did. I saw scale. The same coordination problems plaguing a rural clinic in the Adirondacks were identical to problems in clinics across the developing world. Fragmented systems, poor handoff protocols, resources stuck in the wrong places while patients suffered in others. The solutions were the same too. Standardized transfer protocols, integrated scheduling, predictive logistics. Whoever solved this for one region could solve it everywhere. Year 3. First patent. I remember holding the documents in my hands. Crisp paper, official seals, my name printed in a font that made it look permanent. Proof that my ideas had value, that I wasn't just a placeholder in someone else's story anymore. I started my first company that same year, Health Bridge Logistics, small office in Jersey City. 3 employees, including me. We were going to revolutionize healthcare coordination. We didn't. Year 4, Health Bridge failed. Spectacularly, ran out of funding 6 months before we would have turned profitable. Lost a key contract when a larger competitor undercut us. Watched everything I'd built collapse in slow motion over the course of 3 brutal months. I lost everything I'd rebuilt. Back to a WeWork desk. Anonymous. Temporary. The starter kit for people who've lost everything and are stupid enough to try again. I sat at that desk for 3 days, staring at my laptop, trying to figure out if I had anything left. On the 4th day, I opened a new document, started typing. I don't quit. I recalibrate. The second company learned from the first. Different funding structure, different partnership model, slower growth but more sustainable. I brought in advisors who'd actually built something instead of just theorized about it, made mistakes but never the same mistake twice. Year 5. Corner office, 34th floor. Harbor view that made the entire journey feel worth it. My phone sat on my desk. New model, screen pristine, a far cry from the cracked river delta I'd carried for years. My company had just closed a Series C round, $200 million in fresh capital. I had the firepower. I just needed a target. The city glittered beneath me like something I'd earned the right to look down upon. And then Warren Ashby called. Miss Thorne. His Boston accent was so thick you could pour it over pancakes. I've got an acquisition opportunity I think might interest you. Warren was a fixer. The kind of man companies called when they were hemorrhaging money and needed someone to find a buyer before the bleeding stopped permanently. I'd used him twice for smaller deals. I'm listening. Whitford Strategic Solutions, Boston-based. Management consulting with a healthcare vertical. Used to be worth 180, currently valued at 47, dropping. I stopped breathing. Whitford. The founder passed about 18 months ago, Warren continued. Heart attack. Massive. Son took over as CEO. Nice kid, but let's just say the apple didn't fall close to the tree. What happened? Everything. Failed expansion into European markets. Lost 3 major clients due to personal complications with a board member's wife. Desperate pivots that went nowhere. Warren paused. The board wants out. The son's in denial. Classic founder's heir syndrome. Julian. Singapore had lasted 2 years before his father called him back. The prodigal son returning to learn the business he'd eventually destroy. Julian was running his father's company into the ground. The company he'd left me for. The legacy he'd said was more important than what we had. The picture I wasn't part of. $180 million reduced to 47 because the man who'd called me resilient had proven to be anything but. Miss Thorne, you still there? I'm here. Look, I know it's not your usual profile, but the healthcare consulting vertical, there's value there if someone knows what to do with it. Could integrate nicely with your logistics platform. He was right. It could. But that wasn't why my heart was pounding. Set up a meeting, I said. I'm interested. I ended the call. Walked to the window. 34th floor. The harbor spreading out below me. Boats cutting white lines through gray water. The city I'd once crawled through on aching feet, now arranged beneath me like a promise kept. I smiled for the first time in months. The feeling wasn't joy, wasn't triumph either. Something more complicated lived in that smile. Something that felt like the beginning of a question I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. The man who'd left me with nothing had lost everything himself. And I could buy every piece of it. The acquisition took 4 months. 4 months of intermediaries. Shell companies with names that meant nothing. Lawyers who spoke in documents instead of words. The acquiring entity was listed as Meridian Health Partners. My name appeared nowhere in the paperwork. By design, I wanted the reveal to happen face to face. Wanted to watch understanding dawn in real time. The board of Whitford Strategic Solutions never knew who was buying them. Neither did Julian. I wanted it that way. Due diligence revealed everything. Every mistake. Every failure, every desperate pivot that had accelerated the company's decline instead of slowing it. His father had died 18 months before my call with Warren. Heart attack. Massive, the kind that doesn't give you time to say goodbye, or settle your affairs, or tell your son how to run the empire you spent 40 years building. Julian had inherited a company worth $180 million. 18 months later, $47 million and falling. The European expansion had been his idea. Bold, aggressive, exactly the kind of move his father would never have made without years of preparation. Julian made it in 6 months, lost $30 million before pulling out. Then came the affair. Victoria Hayes, wife of Gerald Hayes. Gerald Hayes, board member. The details were buried in HR complaints and settlement documents. Nothing public, nothing that made the papers. But enough to cost them 2 major clients who didn't want their business associated with that kind of scandal. I never did find out if there was someone else back then. Victoria came later. That much the due diligence confirmed. But that morning, that hesitation, I'd stopped needing to know. Hemorrhaging clients, failed expansion, personal disasters dressed up as professional setbacks. The man who left me because I wasn't part of his picture had painted himself into a very expensive corner. And I held the frame. The night before my first official day as owner, I couldn't sleep. My apartment was silent, city lights bleeding through curtains I'd paid too much for. The corner office lifestyle I'd built for myself. And still that question kept surfacing like something that refused to stay drowned. What do I actually want from this? I could destroy him. Slowly. Publicly. Strip him of his title, his office, his father's name on the building. Make him experience the exact helplessness I'd felt that morning 5 years ago. Watch him realize that everything he'd chosen over me had crumbled to dust. The thought was satisfying, cold and clean. I lay there in the dark, turning it over like a stone in my palm, imagining his face when he understood what I could do to him. The power I held. The leverage. But something else was moving underneath the satisfaction. Something I didn't want to examine too closely. I got up. Crossed to my dresser, opened the nightstand drawer. The photograph was still there, worn around the edges now. 2 people laughing on that rocky beach in Maine. His arm around me, my head thrown back. We'd been so happy that weekend, or I'd been happy. The question of what he'd been feeling, I'd stopped trying to answer that years ago. I'd kept this photo for 5 years. Moved it from Dara's apartment to my first solo place. From there to the condo I bought after the second company took off. From there to here, always in the nightstand drawer, always underneath takeout menus and old receipts. Always present, always hidden. Dara still texts me every morning. Still hasn't said I told you so. Why hadn't I thrown the photo away? I didn't have an answer. Didn't want one. I put the photo back. Closed the drawer. Went to my closet instead. Outfit selection felt like surgery. Every piece chosen with precision. Deep emerald blazer over black silk. Louboutin heels that would click against marble like a heartbeat. Diamond studs, my grandmother's, catching light from every angle. Not armor exactly, but not softness either. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back had sharper edges than I remembered. Harder eyes. The softness Julian had known. It was still there somewhere. Buried. Protected. I wondered if he would see it. Wondered if I wanted him to. Morning came too fast. My driver dropped me at the Whitford building at 8:45. 15 minutes early. Enough time to walk the halls before the board meeting. The elevator took 47 seconds. I counted. Brass fixtures slightly tarnished. Carpet worn in paths that showed where thousands of feet had traveled over decades. Small signs of decline that the financial reports had only hinted at. This company was tired. Running on fumes and legacy. The doors opened. Tessa, the receptionist, looked up. Her eyes widened. She'd been briefed about the new owner, just not prepared for what that owner looked like. Miss Thorne? She stood quickly. Welcome. The board is gathering in the main conference room. Can I get you anything? I'll find my own way. Thank you, Tessa. I walked the hallway slowly, taking it in. 3 generations of Whitford men stared down from portrait frames. Confident jaws, certain eyes. Men who had built something and expected it to last forever. I stopped at the last portrait. Julian's father. Stern eyes. Thin lips pressed together in what might have been disapproval or might have been the photographer's direction. The man who never thought I was good enough for his son. Who saw me as a distraction from legacy. I understand you never approved of me. Let's see how you like this instead. I turned away from the portrait. Walked toward the boardroom. My heels clicked against marble, each step a countdown. The doors were closed. Voices murmured behind them. 11 people waiting to meet the woman who now owned their futures. And Julian was in there, waiting for his new boss. Having no idea that his new boss was the woman he'd left holding cold coffee and an empty lease 5 years ago. I put my hand on the door handle. The question surfaced one more time. What do I actually want from this? I still didn't have an answer. Then I opened the door and walked into the rest of my life.
She's standing at that threshold now, hand on the door. 5 years of intention about to meet its target. And she still doesn't know what she wants. That photograph in her nightstand drawer, kept for 5 years through every move, every success, every late night. You don't keep photos of mistakes. You keep photos of things that mattered. She could destroy him. She has every right. But that's not why she kept the photo. Revenge or reclamation, justice or closure. She doesn't know which one she came for. If you've ever stood at a door like that, caught between who you were and who you're becoming, please subscribe and join our Hearth family. Now, Nadia, take us inside your experience. What did it feel like to become the woman he forgot?
The door swung open. 11 faces turned toward me. Board members rising from leather chairs. The soft whisper of expensive fabric and polite uncertainty. I walked in slowly, deliberate steps, letting each one land with the full weight of 5 years behind it. Ms. Thorne, welcome. A silver-haired man to my left extended his hand. Richard Carey, chairman of the board. I'd memorized every face from the company directory. We're honored to have you. Thank you, Richard. I made my way around the table. Handshake, handshake, smile, handshake, each greeting measured, each moment savored, because at the end of the table, he was waiting. Gray threads at his temples, lines around his eyes. He looked older than 5 years should have made him, worn in ways that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with weight. The weight of a company collapsing. the weight of expectations he couldn't meet. I reached him. "Mr. Whitford." He extended his hand. Professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Thorne. It's a pleasure to finally meet the person who's going to save my father's company." Our palms touched, and I watched it happen. The recognition, spreading across his features like ink through water. Confusion first, brow furrowing, something familiar but not quite placed. Then the pieces clicking together. My face, my voice, the name he should have recognized immediately if he'd thought about me at all in the last 5 years. Elise? The syllables broke in his mouth. A name he'd buried. A ghost he never expected to see sitting at the head of his father's table. "Miss Thorne will do." I held his hand a moment longer than necessary. Let him feel the cold, smooth surface of my rings. The ones I'd bought myself. We're colleagues now. Best to maintain professional distance. I released his grip, turned to address the room. "Please, everyone sit." Board members exchanged glances as they settled into their chairs. They sensed something. History they didn't understand. Tension between their new owner and the man who was supposed to be leading them. Julian sat down heavily, eyes locked on me. Trying to process. Trying to understand how the woman he'd left with cold coffee and an empty lease was now sitting in the chair his father used to occupy. The meeting lasted 94 minutes. I'd prepared for weeks. Every number memorized. Every recommendation backed by analysis he couldn't challenge. 3 redundant departments. Eliminated. 2 strategic partnerships I'd already begun negotiating. Announced. A 5-year recovery roadmap that would rebuild the healthcare consulting vertical into something his father would have been proud of. I spoke. They listened. Julian said almost nothing. But I caught him watching me. Not with anger, not with resentment, with wonder, like he was seeing me for the first time. Like the woman in front of him bore no resemblance to the one he'd left behind. And maybe she didn't. Maybe the woman he'd dismissed as temporary had burned away entirely, leaving only this sharper version, this harder version, this version who owned everything he'd ever wanted. That concludes today's agenda. I closed my portfolio. Crisp, final. I'll be scheduling individual meetings with each department head over the next 2 weeks. "Richard, I'll need 30 minutes with you this afternoon to discuss board restructuring." People gathered their things, murmured amongst themselves, filed out. Julian didn't move. The room emptied, slowly. The door closed behind the last board member. And then, it was just us. 2 people. 5 years of silence. An empty boardroom that suddenly felt very small. 5 years. His voice was rough. 5 years. You bought my father's company. I bought a company that was failing. I gathered my briefcase with careful control. Every movement deliberate. The previous ownership is incidental. Incidental, he laughed. Short, bitter. "Elise, please. Please just talk to me." I stopped. Looked at him. Really looked. 5 years ago, he'd been armored in confidence. Certain of his choices. Certain that his picture was the right one, and I simply didn't belong in it. The man standing before me now looked like that armor had rusted through, piece by piece, until only the vulnerable core remained. Shoulders slightly hunched. Eyes uncertain. Smaller somehow. Less certain of anything. What would you like me to say? I was an idiot. Yes. I was scared and young and I don't care. The words came out colder than I intended. Or maybe exactly as cold as I intended. I couldn't tell anymore. I spent 3 years caring, I said. 3 years wondering what I'd done wrong. Why I wasn't enough. What was broken in me that made you look at me and see nothing worth keeping? He flinched. I don't have room for that anymore. I filled that space with other things, better things. So this is revenge. He stood, moved toward me, stopped when I didn't step back. That's what this is. If this were revenge, I wouldn't have kept your position on the leadership team. His face shifted. Confusion. I could have cleaned house, brought in my own people. Let you experience exactly what it feels like to have someone decide you're not part of their picture. I let that land. Watched him absorb it. But I didn't. I kept you on. I gave you a chance to prove you could change. Does that sound like revenge to you? Then what is this? The question hung in the air between us. I should have had an answer. I'd had 4 months to prepare one. 4 months of imagining this exact moment, planning what I would say when he asked why. But the truth was, I didn't know. I walked toward the door, hand on the handle, stopped. Elise? Miss Thorne. I didn't turn around. We're colleagues now. Remember? What is this? He asked again. Quieter now. Almost pleading. I opened the door. I don't know. The words surprised me as much as they surprised him. I came here thinking I knew exactly what I wanted. Thinking this was about balance. About making you see what you threw away. I still didn't turn around. Couldn't look at his face while I admitted this. But now I'm here. And you're here. And you look like someone who's already been destroyed without my help. Silence. I don't know what this is, I said again. I'm not sure I want to know. Then I walked through the door and left him standing in his father's boardroom, surrounded by portraits of men who would never have approved of any of this. The first week was warfare disguised as professionalism. Every meeting felt like a chess match. Every email a carefully constructed barrier. 5 years of silence weighed on every interaction, filling the spaces between words with things neither of us would say. Julian accepted my authority publicly, never questioned a decision, never pushed back in front of the team. Whatever resentment he might have felt, he buried it deep enough that I couldn't see it. But I caught him watching. In hallways, after meetings, that moment when everyone else had left, and it was just the two of us pretending the air wasn't thick with history. He was looking for something. I wasn't sure I wanted to give it to him. Thursday changed everything. I arrived at my office early, 7:15. The building was quiet. Most of the staff wouldn't filter in for another hour. An envelope sat on my desk. Unmarked, no note. Just a plain manila envelope, edges soft from being handled, placed precisely in the center of my blotter. I knew before I opened it. Somehow, I knew. The photograph was worn around the edges. The same image I'd kept in my nightstand drawer for 5 years. 2 people on a beach in Maine, his arm around her, her head thrown back, laughing. He had his copy too. I sat there for a long time, holding the photograph, trying to understand what it meant that he'd kept it, trying to understand why that fact made my chest feel like something was cracking open inside it. I found him that evening. Parking garage, level 3. He was standing beside his car, and the car itself told a story. Used Volvo, dent in the rear bumper. Nothing like the luxury vehicles he used to drive. Nothing like the life he used to live. What is this supposed to mean? He turned, unsurprised, like he'd been waiting for me. It means I kept it. So? So. He leaned against the Volvo, arms crossed, defensive, vulnerable. You keep things you can't let go of. You don't keep photos of mistakes. You keep photos of things that mattered. That mattered. The words tasted bitter. You left me, Julian. You walked out at 6:47 in the morning and told me I wasn't part of your picture. You said I was resilient, like that was supposed to make it okay. I know. Do you? Do you know what it felt like to realize I'd been a placeholder to you? Something temporary, something you were always planning to replace. I know. You left me with $43 and a lease in your name, and I know. His voice cracked. I say it to myself every morning, every time I look in the mirror. Every time I see someone building something real while I was busy destroying everything I touched. The parking garage was silent. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, an abandoned coffee cup sitting on a concrete pillar nearby. Cold. Forgotten. Like an echo of that morning 5 years ago. What do you want from me, Julian? A chance? He pushed off the car, stepped toward me, stopped when I didn't step back. Forgiveness, just the opportunity to prove I'm not the same man who left you in that apartment. You can't prove that in a conversation. I'm not asking for a conversation. His eyes held mine, uncertain but steady. I'm asking for time. Time. 5 years ago, he'd stolen time from me. 3 weeks of knowing he was leaving while I planned a future that didn't exist. Now he was asking for it back, asking me to give him what he'd never given me. The audacity should have made me angry. It didn't. Here's what happens now. My voice came out steadier than I felt. You report to me, Every decision goes through my office. No special treatment. No private conversations that blur professional lines. You're an employee of this company. Nothing more. I'm not looking for special treatment. Good? I just want the chance to show you who I've become. Who I'm trying to become. I looked at him. Really looked? The gray threads at his temples. The lines around his eyes. The weight he carried in his shoulders. The man who'd left me had been armored in confidence. This man had watched that armor rust and fall away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the person underneath. I didn't know if I could trust that person. I didn't know if I wanted to. We'll see. I turned and walked toward my car. Keys already in my hand, ready to escape. Elise. I stopped. Didn't turn around. I still remember that weekend in Maine. Every detail. The way you laughed at that terrible seafood restaurant. How you fell asleep on the drive home with your hand on my arm. I remember thinking this is what my life is supposed to look like. My throat tightened. And then I got scared. My father, his expectations, the weight of everything I thought I was supposed to be. I made a choice, the wrong choice. And I've spent 5 years paying for it. I got in my car, closed the door, started the engine. He was still standing there when I drove away. The streets were slick with evening rain. City lights blurred through my windshield like watercolors bleeding into each other. I drove without thinking about where I was going. Just moving. Processing. The photograph sat in my briefcase on the passenger seat. His copy. Worn around the edges. Kept for 5 years in a drawer somewhere. Just like mine. 2 copies of the same memory. 2 people who'd been too young and too stupid and too afraid. I'd come back to destroy him. That's what I'd told myself. That's what I'd spent 5 years building toward. The moment when he would look at me and finally understand what he'd thrown away. But instead, I'd discovered he was already destroyed. Not by me, by himself. By choices that had nothing to do with the woman he'd left behind, and everything to do with the man he'd never learned to be. What do you do with revenge when the target has already punished himself more thoroughly than you ever could? I didn't know. But somewhere between the parking garage and my apartment, somewhere in that blur of rain and city lights and memories I thought I'd buried, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the chance to earn it. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator and drove toward whatever came next.
The fire is burning low now, friends, and Nadia's story has reached a resting place, though not quite an ending. She came back with leverage, with power. And what did she find? A man already broken, already paying. 2 photographs, same memory, separate drawers. 5 years. She didn't throw hers away. Neither did he. That has to mean something. She gave him time instead of termination. She left a door open that she had every right to lock forever. That's not revenge. That might just be the beginning of something harder, something braver. If this story gave you something to carry with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone standing at their own green light, deciding which direction to drive. Until next time, friends, stay by the fire.